My fellow bassists, welcome back. So when it comes to slap bass, one of the most common questions that I get is how to make everything sound cleaner. You might be playing all the right notes and rhythms with the right articulations, but somehow it still sounds a bit messy and not like the pro bass lines that you love.
What's that? What's that, brother?
At this point, it's tempting to decide to buy a new bass or piece of gear that'll just magically solve all of the problems, but unfortunately, your gear only plays a pretty small part in whether your bass lines sound clean or messy. The most common reasons why your slap bass lines sound messy comes down to 4 things. Luckily, there's pretty simple solutions to all of these problems, which I'm going to walk you through in the next 10 minutes. Okay, so problem number 1, you might not be hitting the strings accurately with your thumb. If you're not being accurate with your thumb, then you can easily end up hitting 2 strings at a time, which is almost never what you want to actually happen. This causes a random open string to start ringing out, which usually has nothing to do with what you're playing and ends up sounding really messy. If you're slapping with your thumb pointing downwards, I think this actually makes it a little bit harder to slap the strings accurately because your thumb is just spanning more of the strings. Whereas if it's parallel, it's actually quite hard to hit multiple strings at a time. Also, if you slap through the string, you automatically mute the string below the one that you just played, which helps to keep things clean. The other reason your slaps might not be accurate is just because you haven't practiced any exercises that are designed specifically to help with this problem. Luckily for you, I created an exercise that focuses entirely on your thumb and develops your ability to switch between strings seamlessly. I'm going to play it for you now, and as always, there's going to be tabs scrolling along the bottom of the screen. Feel free to play along as many times as you need to get it perfect. Like with all techniques, the key to making your slaps as accurate as possible is to practice exercises like this over and over and over again until they just start becoming second nature. And the best way to practice is with the backing tracks, tabs, and practice videos on Patreon, which you can download for free using the link below. You'll also get instant access to hundreds of bass lessons and exercises covering everything from technique to music theory, tone, ear training, and a lot more. Okay, so the next reason your slap might be sounding messy is because you're not muting the strings properly. There's absolutely tons of ways to mute the strings on bass, but a lot of people only use 1 or 2 of them. I have 4 main muting methods that I use. The first is probably the most common, which is the left hand mute. All you have to do is gently rest all the fingers on your left hand over the strings, and you've muted the entire bass. The next one I use a lot is the right hand mute, where I just rest the base of my thumb on the string like this. I do this during one of the riffs of Elevated. Then there's what I call lifted mutes, where you just lift your finger off the fretboard gently, but not so much that your finger comes off the string. If you do this correctly, it sounds like this. Whereas if you do it too aggressively, it sounds like you accidentally played a pull-off. And then lastly, there's the left thumb mute, where you just use your left thumb to dampen the E string like this. I don't use this one too often because it completely changes your left hand grip and technique, but there are amazing bassists like Victor Wooten who use this technique to great effect. As always, it's not enough to just listen to me rambling about these things. You've got to actually put it into practice yourself if you want to see real improvement. And luckily, again, for you, I've designed an exercise that will allow you to practice all 4 of these muting techniques in one convenient place. Let's do this. Alright, so remember when I said that gear won't solve all your problems? Well, some pieces of gear might help you a little bit, especially if you use them correctly. The third reason why your slap bass lines might sound messy is because you're either not using compression at all, or you're using way too much compression. If you're not using compression at all, then sometimes slap bass can actually sound a little bit painful to listen to because your volume varies so drastically between the slaps and the pops. But on the other hand, if you use too much compression, then all of your little mistakes and excess noise and the sound of your strings sliding around will get amplified to the point where that noise will be just as loud as the actual notes that you're trying to play. Here's an example of some overly compressed slap bass. The controls on compression plugins and pedals can vary quite a lot, but in general, I tried to go for a pretty fast attack and release with a moderate gain reduction. And if you want exact numbers, I tend to use about 2 milliseconds for the attack, about 10 milliseconds for the release, and then an average gain reduction of about 6 or 7 dB. Bear in mind that some amps do have built-in compression, so just check that. And in general, it's very rare for pro bassists to play slap bass with no compression at all. So if your amp doesn't already have it, just try your best to get your hands on either a compressor, pedal, or plugin, depending on what you do most of the time. Okay, the last reason your slap bass lines might sound messy is because you're using the wrong EQ settings. If you're using too much bass frequencies, everything's gonna sound muddy and unclear. If you're using too much high frequencies, it'll sound really thin and tinny and you'll have loads of string noise. And then if there's too much mids, it's gonna sound nasally. I always find that a scooped EQ is a good way to go, which just means that you boost the bass and highs a bit and cut some of the mids. On this bass, I usually have the bass at 10, the mids at 7, and the highs at 10, but All basses are different, and the same is true for amps, so your settings might vary a little bit from mine. Just remember what I said earlier about how to identify if there's too much of any frequency, and you should be able to dial in a pretty good tone. So there you go, those are the 4 main reasons why your slap bass lines might sound messy. Again, if you want to get your slap bass lines sounding as clean and pro as possible, you can download the free practice videos, tabs, and backing tracks for every exercise in this video if you just tap the link below. I hope this video helped you out. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next lesson.